This video is sponsored by Envato Elements. Hey everyone, this video is a bit special. I was invited by Envato to participate in the Arcane fan art contest along with other incredible and inspiring artists all across the world. Although this is a fan art contest and is not sponsored or done in partnership with Riot Games, the creator of Arcane, but this will be really big. And in this video I'll show you how I created my entry for the contest. Speaking of Arcane, if you haven't watched it yet, be sure to check it out after you finish my video. It is a visual masterpiece with mind-blowing character development and storytelling. I've literally paused it many times to get inspired by the beautiful visuals of each and every frame. With so many incredible artists who have been my inspiration throughout my journey participating in this Arcane fan art contest, I'm a little nervous about how my entry will turn out to be. But I'm really grateful to Envato for inviting me in. It is indeed a wonderful opportunity to push my boundaries and evolve as an artist. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it and let's create. About the composition, I became a bit ambitious and thought about creating this scene with the city of Piltover with the two sisters, Jinx and Vi, chilling out. But this angle became very challenging to create with just photo manipulation, and I really felt the need for 3D or digital painting. Since photo manipulation is my niche, I wanted to stick to my roots and see what I could achieve with it. So I trashed the idea and tried something simple with straightforward character creation with photo manipulation. You must be a fan of Jinx, everybody loves her. But I'm a big fan of her big sister Vi. She's totally kick-ass. So the composition will revolve around a live-action photorealistic version of her. I started with going into Envato Elements and searched in the photos section with a female fighter, and this image caught my attention. As I felt with some modifications, I could turn her to look like Vi in real life. Maybe close to her, we'll see. I dropped her into Photoshop and quickly selected her out, then I went into the Liquify Face Over Tools section and tweaked the settings, like reducing the smile, widening the eyes, nudging the chin a bit. I just messed around with the settings. Then I started creating her Atlas gauntlets, but this was really challenging with just photo manipulation. 3D would have been perfect here, but I tried painting things as I don't have substantial 3D knowledge to create it. Again, I don't have much experience in digital painting, but I tried to bring in my traditional painting concepts. So I'm not the best person to guide you over here, but I'll keep explaining whatever I did. I dropped some reference images and did an initial block out with a solid color. By the way, the cosplay gauntlet image that I used here for reference is incorrect, so I'll change it afterward. I did some rudimentary color blocking just to see where this is all going. Next, I moved on to creating her red jacket. I used the jacket from this image as it had more or less the same angle. I used the clone stamp tool to remove the metal spikes and then used the hue saturation colorized section to add a red color cast. Since Vi's jacket has a more or less matte look, I used curves to remove the shine from the leather jacket. I created a strong inverted S curve in the RGB channel that darkened up the highlights and brightened the shadows, creating a reduction in the shine. I duplicated the curves multiple times until I liked the effect. I didn't quite like her pose, so you can see some adjustments that I made. I added her white shirt from this boxer and also did some extra adjustments with the warp tool to fit the jacket and correct the posture according to my liking. For the hoodie, it was an easy patchwork sampling from this image. This PNG was downloaded from Envato Elements 3D section and I could rotate it to fit the angle of my character easily. Since this is an action scene, I needed to match the facial expression. For that, I used the eyebrows from this image. I used curves wherever necessary to match the value and color to the original image. I manually painted additional facial features like cut marks, tattoos, nose ring and the earrings matching the original character. Time to do her iconic side shift undercut hair. For the side shift part, I used this image. Luckily the hair was already red, so I did not have to do a major color change. For the longer part of the hair on the right, I used this image as it's pretty messy and would roughly match up the layers and the motion of the scene. After that I quickly masked up the unnecessary parts of the hair from the original image. For coloring the hair, I used a gradient map with some red-pink shades. I kept painting additional hair strands on separate layers to give volume and fine-tune the edges. I also painted some additional blemishes and textures on the skin. After that, I started painting some additional details on the gauntlets. But as the gauntlet that I started with was not the correct one, I soon discarded them and did the whole thing again from scratch. So here you can see I brought multiple images of the gauntlet from different angles and started to work on the basic skeleton afresh. As I mentioned earlier, I don't have much idea about digital painting, but I try to do it the way I remember other artists painting and mostly what felt good to me. At first, I just blocked off the basic shapes with the base colors, then I started adding details and depth using the tonal variations of those colors. The main challenge was to get the machine parts correct. I think sculpting it with 3D would have been perfect, but again, that's not an option for me now. And creating it with foil manipulation would have been a very big challenge anyway. So painting was the best option for me. After the detailed shapes and basic lighting was done, I added some specular highlights with a brighter shade of the midtone color and some stark shadows wherever needed. Time to move on to finishing the dress. There are some unique details on the trousers. I think there are two pieces of the trousers with a cutout on the top one, and she also wears a waist strap fastened with two belts. I started with blocking out the shapes and took a leather beanbag, cut it and warped it approximately for the waist strap. For the top loose fitting one, I took these somewhat pink trousers and applied hue saturation colorize to change them to the desired color. For the finer details, I took a manual approach. For the stripes, I clipped a layer on top in overlay blending mode and painted the stripes with a darker color. I think she also has a pouch on the side, but I skipped it for simplicity. For the belts, it was easy to grab them from Envato Elements 3D section. I downloaded several PNGs at different angles and batched them appropriately. I used curves wherever necessary to darken them up and make the color homogeneous across the patchwork. Then I again worked on the jacket, this time adding some finer details, motifs and embellishments. I sampled a part from another leather jacket and added a quick curves to turn it into a dark red shade. Manually painted the shoulder pad rib, the additional stitches and the emblems. Coincidentally, the stock jacket also had a pocket which I could just reposition and change the color. Next, I used curves to create the darker red shade for the accent materials. I just painted on the layer mask at appropriate places to finish the design. I also painted the button with the base beige color and added some quick depth using tonal variation of the color. Next, it's time to create adversaries. I absolutely love this action sequence, and I feel this is one of the best fight scenes in the show. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for me to go with the chem tanks as the villain. I guess they're called chem tanks. Anyway, first I took some samples from the scenes trying to figure out what would match best with my setting. I tried extracting them out and did some mix and match, but don't worry, I will make them from scratch. Once I finalized, I did a quick line work to use them as guides for my photo manipulation. Once done, time to work on the hard part. The metal areas were mostly brass, I think, so I again went into Envato Elements and searched up some brass diver helmets and some brass pipe fittings in the 3D section. This 3D section really came in handy here as I could easily rotate the pieces to get the perfect angle for my composition. By the way, Envato Elements, who is the sponsor of today's video, is much more than just stock photos and 3D assets. It is the perfect one-stop shop to satisfy all your creative needs. You can get thousands of royalty-free music and loads of motion graphic templates and stock video footage, along with a wide array of fonts, add-ons, graphic templates, and so much more. And you get unlimited downloads to everything with just a single subscription, and that too for less than $20 a month with their 50% discounted annual plan, which again you can cancel anytime if you want. If you think Envato Elements is for you, you can get your subscription today by using the link in the description section and unlock unlimited creative assets. Now, coming back to our composition, I kept searching for the perfect brass fitting and kept mixing and matching them on the headpiece. It is just a matter of time and experiment to figure out the correct piece for the structure. I used this helmet visor for the glass part in the helmet. I used hue saturation colorize to quickly add a violet color cast and masked out areas matching the initial sketch. I did some paint overs to add the 3D depth to the metal structures. I downloaded a bunch of brass nuts and bolts from Envato Elements 3D section and used some quick paint overs to add extra details and variation on the chem tank headpiece. Now that I had already used the diver helmet, why leave the body alone? Coincidentally, it matched somewhat with the original design. So I created the body from a couple of diver PNGs, and it's no surprise that these PNGs of the 3D assets are also downloaded from Envato Elements. For the apparatus on the hand, I used a brass helmet part to create a quick base. On top of that, I mainly painted the shadows and highlights and additional textures. I took the same approach for the chest piece armor. I created a base metal texture sampling parts from the helmet, then manually painted highlights and shadows to add the finer details and the 3D depth. I used curves to create a quick brown color cast and used it to create the piece covering the torso. I took the same approach for creating the chem tank on the right. I won't bore you with the same explanation, I'll just let you enjoy the time lapse with the background music. With the subjects done, now it's time to work on the environment. My objective is to create it aligning with the shimmer chemical facility that we see in these scenes. So I used parts from this image to create a railcar track bridge where the fight is taking place. For the midground and the background, I used this factory image. I did spend quite some time finding images having similar perspectives. Rest, I tried to align with the distort section of the free transform tool. For the far background, I used parts from these smoky industrial structures. I added a quick blue color cast using hue saturation colorize. On top of that, I painted some mist and haze to build up the atmospheric perspective. The original chemical facility looks like a mix between a mine and a factory, so I patched in some stone textures sampling from this image. I dropped some pipes and darkened them up using curves. I also tried to match the color tones at the same time. Moving on to color grading the chem tanks, I changed the metal color using hue saturation colorize but darkened up the entire character using curves. Added some blue-gray haze on top to build up the atmospheric perspective and clipped a highlights layer using curves. I filled the layer mask with black and started painting on it with white to reveal the highlights. The overhead light source is set to come from the top left. With the basic highlights in place, I added curves layer to add individual shadows to the various elements. For the glass piece on the headgear, I set a curves layer to a bright violet shade and painted on an inverted layer mask. I also used it to add the reflected violet light on the metal pieces. I added a zombie face, masked and morphed it into place and painted some highlights coming from the bottom. After adding some further details, I started adding the green glows. At first I marked them out on a solid green color fill layer, then I added the curves in a bright green shade and on the inverted layer mask I painted the glowing areas. Added some more shadows with curves and masked it out from the lit regions. I switched the mouth area with a screaming face and adjusted the highlights accordingly. I took a similar approach to color grade and create the glowing areas on the right chem tank. For the environment, I added a violet underglow as it was in the original scene. You will see the same coming from the shimmer deposit at the bottom. I also created a curves layer in the violet shade and defined the shapes in the background structures. I defined the structures on the top with a bluish grey color instead of violet. For the color grading on Vi, I reduced the saturation with a hue saturation adjustment layer and significantly darkened her up using curves. Started adding some basic highlights again with the curves layer clipped to the main group. I used separate passes of bright blue curves layer to stack and create the blue light and highlights from the gauntlets. I really liked the dappled light on the floor of the stock image I used, so I thought about keeping it. But in a dark gloomy scene like this, I felt that dappled light could only be justified by shafts of light coming from the top left. So I put a blank layer in overlay blending mode and blocked out some light shafts using the polygonal lasso tool. Added a Gaussian blur to feather them out. I experimented a bit with the color grading here. I added two curves adjustment layer to add some interesting color shifts and also lift the blacks a bit. Mostly I tried to respect the original mood of the scene in the show. On top of that, I added two color lookup tables, Crisp Warm and Film Stock 50 in color blending mode. Next, I took a black fill layer, set it to screen blending mode and dabbed some color around the glowing areas to create a bloom effect. I took a similar black fill layer in screen blending mode and added some shine where the light directly hits the metal surfaces. topped it with a subtle bokeh effect on the strong glowing regions and some dust particles in the light shaft areas. I also took a blank layer in soft light blending mode and painted some ambient light in the areas necessary. After that, I took a snapshot of everything and added a radial blur, but added a black mask to the effect and made it visible only in the required areas like the arms of the chem tanks. I took a snapshot of everything again and went into the lens corrections to add a chromatic aberration, mask the effect only in the peripheral regions. It occurred to me that the left side of the composition was drawing too much attention, so I darkened it up, added some extra shadows here and there, and I became tempted to draw a railing on the platform. It must have triggered from the original scene, but I decided to quickly paint it instead of photo manipulation. I added some more reflected light by painting on a layer set to overlay blending mode. And finally, I topped it with some broken glass for a dynamic particles effect. I did add some highlights to accentuate the broken shards. I also took a snapshot of the entire image and used the smudge tool to distort the areas under the glass just to create the refraction effect. I did some more polishing off screen, and here goes the final result. I hope you liked the artwork. If so, please don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. If you found the video helpful, do let me know in the comments below. And if you like my overall content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That would greatly motivate me to create more videos like this. Well then, I will see you in the next video, and till then, enjoy creating.